Welcome to Astro Chat with Anne Sundell, Kimberly Williams, and Monica Anna. We are three professional astrologers living in three separate countries, coming together every new and full moon to share our 3 points of view on astrology. Whether you enjoy deep dives into the current transits or you are just beginning to learn about astrology for the first time, there is a place for you here. All that is required is an appreciation for astrology, along with a respect for the various traditions within it. So grab a mug of coffee, your favorite cup of tea, or any other beverage of your choice, and join us for a chat on the astrology of the next 2 weeks. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another Astro Chat. I'm Kimberly Williams, and I'm here with our lovely co-hosts Anne Sundell and Monica Anna. We are looking at the full moon in July. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see the chart here. July 13th at 7:38 over in England, which means that here in Texas, we're going to have it in the afternoon around 1:38. Over in Finland, 9:38. Yeah, if you live somewhere else, not in our areas, you can do the math and figure it out. We're really excited to be looking at another lunation. One of the things before we jump in, talking about this moon, you may have heard people talk about it as a supermoon, a thunder moon, a buck moon. We were just having a conversation about that a moment ago. There's a lot of names that different cultures and different traditions will give to each full moon. And that is really fascinating. If you want to go research that or look into that or already use that, wonderful. It's not astrology, though. In astrology, the term that we stick with is every once in a while, a full moon will occur simultaneous with the moon's closest approach to Earth, or what is often called perigee. And that's when you hear the term supermoon. So if you're seeing that on social media, that is astrology. And we're excited because we're having a supermoon this month. Before we jump into looking at the aspects and dividing the chart out, how about just taking a quick, brief minute to tell everybody what is going on in your world these days? Monica, you want to lead us off?
Sure. It's been an interesting month, and I have to say, since the new moon, there's been a lot of energies, and especially around our work and who I am as a woman and who I am as an identity. What's my identity in the world? So it's been interesting. It's been an interesting month, Cancerian month. I would love to hear what our listeners have to say about that. But also this month was interesting. It brought me a few interesting opportunities. I'll be leading a astrological sharing circle for the Mythic Network by Dr. Sharon Blackie. So I'm super excited about that. Talking to the community in her membership program about the moons and astrology. So I'm super excited. We start in August. I also had a couple podcast interviews, which was brilliant because I love talking about astrology, and probably even on this podcast, I talk way too much. So even like an hour podcast, it's just not long enough. I could do it like a marathon. Maybe we can challenge ourselves and do like a 24-hour marathon or something one time, and I'm sure we wouldn't run out of the topic. But that was lovely. Just being able to share in that Cancerian moon as well, share with my, so to speak, tribe, the stuff that I love. And I also had a conversation with my publisher, Liminal 11, about my upcoming book journal that I created with them. It's ready, and we're just waiting for the publishing date. So it looks like it will be early spring next year. So I'm really looking forward to having my advanced copy sometime in the next 2-3 months, and then waiting for the publishing date. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks, I have to say.
That is awesome.
Not
Anne?
as interesting, I have to say, as Anne's.
Yeah, Anne, tell us a little bit about what's going on in your world.
Yeah, it's been an interesting year. When listening to Monica, I'm really excited. I mean, the feeling of waiting to get your copy of your book. I mean, that's amazing. Our first edition of our book is is have soon been sold out. So I'm really happy about that too.
That's
I hope
amazing.
that
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I'm very happy that people were interested. Finnish language is a bit isolated still, so I mean it's a good sign. And yeah, in my world, what's happening is a lot that maybe relates to this full moon. Also, is the family, and so me and my partner are expecting a baby very soon. Any day now, so it's kind of really exciting. And I have a interesting Uranian transit at the same time, so I think it's gonna be a interesting change in the rhythm in the daily rhythm too.
That's so exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
Over here, it has been a month of ups and downs for sure. Last month, I was riding a real emotional high. I had gone to Wisconsin, met with some amazing group of goddess women, was doing readings at a store up there, just having such a time. And since I've come back, it's been very busy, catching up on clients, readings, things of that nature, preparing some new classes, getting ready for some exciting classes on the goddess asteroids and Black Moon Lilith that are coming out this fall. And then there was that real huge low as the Supreme Court was releasing a lot of decisions that I am not aligned with, shall we say. I think that's the kindest way I can phrase it. And so it's been bringing up a lot of sorrow and anger and emotions that perhaps are, as I look at the astrology, emotions that are really old and that are tied in not only to myself, but to perhaps my mother and my grandmothers, that there's just been this need to process. And as we've all talked about together, the three of us, processing often means letting ourselves feel the feels that are really unpleasant in order to bring things up and before we can finally release. So that's sort of what's been swirling. The good news is I'm about to launch a Patreon page. My plan, my goal, my hope is it will launch on or very close to this full moon that we're talking about. And then through there, more good things are coming. So let's dive into the astrology of our July 13th full moon. Monica, I think you're going to lead us off with info about having the moon in Capricorn.
Yes. So having the moon in Capricorn, well, the new moon in Capricorn, it's usually in January. So what do we do in January? We plan our year ahead. So January is the Capricorn moon, so Capricorn month, obviously starts mid-December. So that's the time when we make our plans, when we put together our vision board, when we are very structured in how we approach the coming year, and we do all the New Year's resolution. Help Capricornian is that. And now in the midst of summer, we have a full moon in Capricorn. Jesus. We have a full moon in Capricorn. The sun is in Cancer. And the question is, what have we done over the last 6 months with that energy? So what have we done with the plans that we set up of the new moon in Capricorn, and what's coming to fruition now? Like we discussed in our episodes, full moon is about blossoming. It's about that energy that's coming out. We planted a seed, whether at the beginning of the month with the new moon intention, or we planted that seed maybe a bit earlier. Astrology is the beauty of astrology is the cycle. It's not just the monthly cycle. It's the cycle that started in the new moon in Capricorn 6 months ago. It's also the bigger cycle, which we're not going to go into it here. But maybe it's worth looking at during the full moon in Capricorn. What have I achieved? That's a very Capricornian keyword. What have I achieved? With what have I persevered over the last 6-7 months to get to where I am? We all have some projects that kind of coming to fruition now. Obviously, all that was working behind the scenes on something. So if you look at your life, this is the time in a summer, you're harvesting things, well, actually not yet, but everything's coming to a bloom around that time, around the time of June, July, around the time of the full moon in Capricorn. What mountain have you climbed to get where you are now? What obstacles have you conquered? What goals and plans that you set up for yourself, you achieved? This is your time to pat yourself on the shoulder, to see how far you've come, to see that with certain things in your life, you are an authority. Capricorn energy is the energy of perseverance. It's energy that shows us that we have mastery within certain subject or certain sphere of life, that we put the hard work in. You know, someone who won a gold medal in Olympics in rowing, I bet that person put hours and hours into knowing how to do that, what's the best way, what's the best rowing machine to train on. They persevered until they achieved that success. And they're an expert. If they tell you something about the rowing, pretty sure they know what they're talking about, because they looked at it from every angle to be where they are. And that's like with everything, whether you're a chef, whether you are a financial manager, whether you're a customer service person, if you put an hours into something, look at how far you've come. Look at all the obstacles that you had to conquer, had to overcome to actually be where you are. And I think full moon in Capricorn, for me, it's appreciating the work and the hard times that were in the past that put us where we are now. What do you all think?
That's beautiful. I love
Oh,
that.
thanks.
Yeah, I think that's so appropriate. I like that appreciating, because when the moon is in Capricorn, often there's a tendency to focus on how it can be harsh and difficult, and there's obstacles to overcome. And certainly that can be a part of the picture, but I think you're right. It's really about appreciating, looking at the whole plan of this journey that we're on and appreciating what we're trying to accomplish, what we've already accomplished, where we're at, tweaking. And when it's the annual full moon, right, we're balancing that Capricorn and Cancer energy. I think too, there's also a layer here of looking at one's responsibility or duty around family, around home, around those concepts. And for me, what I've noticed is every year around this time, there's really a strong focusing on what are the labels I've taken on? What is the responsibility, duty I've assumed so much that I've identified with it? You know, it's not about I'm doing the work of a mother and nurturing. I am a mother. It's not about me doing the work. I'm a Virgo, so obviously I'm going into work. But, you know, it's not about the thing I'm being. A friend of mine keeps telling me, you're a human being, not a human doing. And I think sometimes that's that balancing of the Cancer and the Capricorn, the sun and the moon. What is it that I want to take responsibility for? Where is it I've gotten boxed in by my assumption that this label is something I identify with and it's a part of me? And so there's a stripping away as well as a moving into that I really like about this time of year. And it makes sense. It's 6 months out from when our year began. So it's a perfect time to stop and kind of reflect and evaluate what has worked, check those check boxes, what has not worked, how am I going to tweak that going forward? And how do you like working with this moon in Capricorn?
I think Moon in Capricorn is interesting also for me because I've been growing up with people that have Moon in Capricorn, or also have a child that has Moon in Capricorn. So it's kind of familiar for me, the way of Capricorn moons. But I think when Monica was talking about harvest and harvest and be proud of where you have what you have achieved. Capricorn is not always so good at that, at harvest, at being proud of themselves or what, to taking that what belongs to them actually for the hard work, and remember that you're worth that, and also take the time to relax. And I mean, I look at the sun in Cancer and the moon in Capricorn, so like you said, Kimberly, it might be a bit hard to combine these two. You might feel that, okay, now I have achieved this, but I maybe want to do some more. I maybe need to take on this responsibility also at the same time that you maybe want to have some time off and maybe with your families. I think that might be a kind of a balance in that area during this full moon.
I have to say, I love what you said about, this is the time, Kimberly, this is the time of the family. And that polarity between family in Cancer and Capricorn being out there in the world, it's super clear. If you don't know what we're talking about, that polarity and those archetype, try to bring your work persona into family dinner. You will know exactly what we're talking about, because we are different out there in the world. We created, especially if you already, a person who separate themselves from the family in certain way. You went out to university or college, you moved out, you're different with your friends, you might achieve certain things, whether in academic field or you're already working, and then you come back home for a family holidays, whether it's 4th of July or whatever holidays you celebrate in your country. And then they still see you as that 12-year-old person. They still see you with with the same quirky things that you were, even though you're 10, 20, 30 years older. And this is beautiful when you actually see, my family doesn't see me who I am in the world, because they still see me as that person completely merged within the family. But also it's really interesting to see as well, if you can take that mindful moment around the family table to see what are their family traditions and what are the discussions, and how far maybe you have to pull yourself away. We all have different maybe political views or religious views, and there's quite a few things in our world these days that polarizing us, not just with our friends but also within our family units. And again, the Cancer Capricorn moon can talk about that polarity. What is important to you? What have you taken away from your family that you then went out into the world and you kind of follow up with? And what is it that your family traditions and mindset is holding you back and you need to let go? And I think in the light of the full moon, when the two luminaries in a horoscope are opposing one another, the shadows are coming out, because for shadows, there's nowhere to hide. Shadows like the new moon, or the quarter moon. But in the light of the full moon, the shadow is visible. It's clearly visible. That energy is just bursting. So that is interesting time. And with the aspects that we will be talking about, especially the one Anne you'll be bringing up now, I think there is that kind of element of an underground work that we need to do.
Yeah, talking about the underworld, then Pluto is close to the moon, I think with Pluto, you might consider it still be worth mentioning, even if it's 6 degrees in between. It has a special vibe to it also with the moon. And as I was talking or said earlier, with the Capricorn, with also maybe self achieve things, there all might also be a sense for thinking about what you could have done better or what you are not happy with. And you want to go, maybe it might stir up emotions, and it might be strong emotions, or you might feel that maybe I was left out from something I wanted to do, or why didn't I do this or in this way. And this is something I feel with Capricorn, that you might be a bit too hard on yourself very easily. So also with going into those emotions and accepting that they are a part of this process, and still work with Pluto, like Monica said, work with the shadows. They come out, you see them, and you accept them, and as a part of this process. I think that might be one of the things that can be associated with the aspect. Also that it's an opposition from Pluto to the Sun, to Mercury, and that might also be felt a bit like a power struggle sometimes. It might be felt like you need to maybe address some feelings from other people, or that there's some undertense emotions here with this moon.
And I think it's interesting too that a lot of times with Pluto, I'm focusing on the fears and I'm looking back in the past, and with Pluto the moon, it's easy to think, well, this is going to be about the past or old trauma or fears. But as I've been looking at this, I'm recognizing too that it's that Capricorn energy that is coming forward. So perhaps some of the deep-seated emotional fears around this are about what I need to do. If I'm stepping into taking authority, taking responsibility for creating the life I want, if, we've been talking for 2 years now, right, about the Great Resignation, about people wanting to make major changes in their life, that as Pluto is starting to come to the end of this long transit through Capricorn, there's like this desire for transformation about our work in the world and how we go about doing that. Well, one of the layers of this might also be, I kind of get this image of Inanna, after she's gone through the humongous journey of going into the underworld and dying and coming back. She starts to leave and she's at the edge of the cave, and there's that moment of freeze of, I don't know about returning to the world, because if I do, I have to assume my authority as queen, and in her story, in her myth. And that's kind of what I see here, is sort of this, whoa, it's time to take that next step out into the world as myself, as the authority, as the work that I want to do, to begin living as if it's manifest. And that can be really scary, because all of the emotions that have made it difficult to do that previously are still there to be worked through. So I agree totally with what you're saying, Anne, that this is so emotional. And also I'm thinking that a lot of that emotion isn't just about what is or has been, but also about what I need to make come forward.
I just it came to my mind example when I was working with a person that was strong Capricorn, and we both got a better position at the same time. And I was like, with my fire energy, I was like, yeah, this is great. I mean, it's new challenges and stuff. And I said, so you aren't happy? And she was like, yeah, I'm happy, but think about all the responsibility. Think about all the things you have to do with this. I mean, that's the reaction from Capricorn, I think, that you think about what's to come and what you need to achieve and do and so on.
Well, Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, and no one seemed to like Saturn. He's getting such a bad rap. But Saturn, as a ruler of Capricorn and of this full moon as well, that's the planet that expects us to mature and take accountability for our actions. So we can't just keep blaming things like, oh, this is my mom, this is my partner, this is my job, this is my boss, this is my government, this is my culture. Like, at some point, for certain things, we need to take accountability for our own actions. And we know that there's so much broken within the systems that we live in. And there's a lot that we need to change. And I love that some people actually calling not necessarily for reform, but for revolution. And I think there is a certain truth to that, but that's for maybe another conversation. But also, it's like within the structures and the systems, where do you take accountability? Where do you give it away? But where you take accountability for your own actions and understand that you do have power to change things. Because when we give that power away, oh no, it's like, it's my boss that is bad, or it's my partner that is bad, and that's why I don't have a great marriage, or it's my culture that is bad, that's why I don't have something. Again, I'm not taking away from the hardship, because I understand them, and I understand that certain systemic things are not easy to be changed by individual, but also it is every individual taking that small change that makes that huge wave. And we've seen that time and time again when people make the change together, because they take to the streets, or they vote, or they do something together. They make small changes that has a huge impact. And I think the full moon in Capricorn is asking you, where are you taking responsibility for your own life? This is why I'm always so keen on the New Year's resolution. And again, a recent trend in recent years is like, there's no point of setting them up, because they, by 6th of January, 20th of January, they're forgotten and so on. And I am too Saturnian within myself, but I'm thinking, well, if we're giving up on them in January, then what are the chances do we have for something to bloom in a summer? at the full moon in Capricorn. If I want to, learn French, and then by 20th of January, I was like, oh yeah, that was a silly New Year's resolution. What was I thinking? Well, by summer, if I'm going to France, I won't be able to speak, 2 words. So this is and then you can't blame, oh yeah, I have busy life, I have this, I have that. Well, if you wanted something, you would have found time. There's one thing that I've learned in one of the time management classes, and I thought that was brilliant. And someone said to me, we do not manage our time, we manage our priorities. If something is your priority, you will find the time. And I think this is, again, time and Saturn and Capricorn responsibility. If something we know it's our priority, burst pipe in your house, I bet you'll find the time for that. So if something is priority, we will find time to do that. So Capricorn, it teaches us that. If you want to make yourself or your own power or your own goals a priority and take responsibility and power for them, then you can't blame anyone else. That's a very positive spin, aren't we?
It makes me want to do this, which is the sprinkles are I so agree, ditto, and I don't want to interrupt your flow of thought. So yes, so
Thank
jazz
you.
hands here in total affirmation, confirmation of what you're saying.
I just wanted to make one more comment, and I think we're going to do that a bit later in an episode. There is still a theme of feminine power rising, and Capricorn is a feminine sign. I'm not saying female, male, as in gender. I'm saying feminine energy, yin energy, or there are different names. I don't think any of them are particularly well and descriptive, but this is a different feminine energy rising. And I think that power, the Pluto on that moon in Capricorn, that Lilith that was on the new moon that we were talking about in a previous episode, there is something that's stirring, that making a rise to different type of power. And the question is, are we going to step in and run with it, or are we going to recoil from the fear and take a step back and let other people take it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And also, I think, as you both mentioned, a lot of this is about moving that power and taking that action out in the world within structures that exist, the Capricornian side of life. How are we going to exert our influence, our power out in the world in some way? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I'm going to refer back to something Monica said earlier, which is it can be really useful to go back, and if you keep a journal or even just a planner, what was going on in your world the first week in January, right? I think it was January 2nd, we had the new moon in Capricorn. And so a lot of what was being planted then, the seeds that were being put into our unconscious then, are unfolding or opening up now. And after you had mentioned that in a discussion we had, Monica, I went back and listened to our podcast from then, and it was amazing. We had so many planets transiting through Capricorn. We were talking about all the hard work, and I was looking at my journal of like what was happening. And it's interesting that many of the goals I set then in a very linear way, that it just hit obstacle after obstacle, delay after delay, these 6 months, they're all coming to fruition now. And it's really about putting energy out into the world. So kind of interesting to follow those cycles within cycles. And speaking of cycles within cycles, let's talk about Mercury, unless y'all have something else to say. Mercury is in this full moon energy. It is conjunct the sun, opposing the moon. It will, in just a few days, and I think, Monica, you have the dates, it will be Cazimi. If you're not familiar with those terms, like when things start to approach the sun, the sun has a really wide sphere of influences, up to 18 degrees. Things are under the beams. They start to get closer. When they're within the same degree, minutes might vary, but within that same degree, they're Cazimi. It's like in the eye of the sun is a way you might see it on social media, often posted. When things pass in between the sun and us, it literally looks like it's crossing the sun. When it passes between the sun on the other side, we don't see it, but it's still that same energy effect of this intensity, this merging. And there's something interesting with the sun hitting a Mercury, because the sun energy is so strong, it can almost blot out the energy of a planet from us feeling it, us being able to maneuver it, us being able to work with it. And the fact that it's not just hitting that sun, it's Cazimi the sun, and it's happening while it's opposing that moon, I think means there's a lot happening to change our thinking. And something that's interesting, I was looking up the what was out of orb. I'm not out of orb, sorry. What was out of bounds on this particular chart. And Mercury is out of bounds until about an hour after the exact full moon. And the moon is out of bounds throughout. So that to me just adds this extra layer. If you're not familiar with out of bounds, it's really worth looking into. There's something here where everything can be erratic and strong and intense. It can go haywire, but it can also be that place of genius. So I think because this is a place of genius and not being conventional, I think what this means is our thinking may be in the midst of some type of growth or shift. I mean, it's Mercury, it's in Cancer. What is going on with my internal thinking, and what is going on externally with the way that I communicate? Is there nurturing happening? Is there perhaps too much strictness about what I can and cannot say, or the ways that we say it? These are the questions I'm asking myself with this energy of Mercury conjunct and opposite the luminaries, but also about to be Cazimi, and also with the out of bounds. I know that's a lot I'm throwing out there. So Monica, Anne, what do you guys think about this?
I think it's interesting that Mercury is still involved, and I haven't checked the out of bounds, but it's really interesting that both Mercury and Moon are out of bounds during this lunation. I like that out of bounds planets bring us something. It's kind of a little bit like a Uranian energy, not in a way that it brings something unexpected, but in a way that it doesn't behave like we expected it to behave. So the moon in Capricorn, might be full of fears and might be very strict and maybe very reserved. But if it is out of bounds, it will show that completely different way. It will act in a different way, like in a way that as a society, as a culture, we might not approve of, or we might think it's weird and eccentric. That's why I mean it's fairly Uranian energy for me. So it's interesting that, again, such a strong signs, Cancer and Capricorn, that are, if you were to look anywhere in a zodiac for tradition and structure, those are the two signs that you're looking at. You have Mercury and Moon at that lunation in those two signs, saying there is something that we're going to thinking, there will be something that we will be thinking, saying, communicating about the structure and family and tradition and maybe the governance that is out of ordinary, that is unexpected, that is something that maybe it's slightly out of the blue from the left side field, not expected, not quite understood, but there might be those conversations. And I think Mercury, Cazimi in Cancer, it's an interesting beginning of a new cycle. And I think, again, it's that kind of, I am repeating myself and I'm aware of that, but I think it's yet another layer of that feminine energy rising and saying, hey, I want to have a voice and I will speak differently. So again, that Mercury in Cancer, being burned by the sun, being reborn at the heart of the sun, with the Lilith closely behind that as well. There's something about the Cancerian waters that we are being reborn, that there is that kind of energy rising, saying, I want to express myself differently. I want to have different labels. I want to connect in a different way. So I am interested to see what will happen.
Yeah, and I'm thinking as you're talking too, if what we've been mentioning is that with that Capricorn energy, there's a stepping out of the labels or the conditioning or what we assume our role and our duty is, or if it's just moving past the walls that we have put up emotionally, this could be saying that it's a time where Mercury's going to be encouraging us to perhaps speak out in ways we normally wouldn't. I'm thinking about those times when we have conversations and suddenly you do, oh, was that my out loud voice? I thought I was thinking it, but it came out. That there can be these moments of suddenly I am giving voice to my thoughts rather than just thinking to holding them. And what is your take on Mercury's influence here?
Well, I think of the bound planets like the Moon and Mercury, both are often associated with the geniuses, with thinking outside the box and finding a new solution. But I mean, Mercury is a trickster and he's out of bounds. So he's kind of hiding out from the sun at the same time as he's Casimir the sun. So I mean, that's kind of, and I just think that maybe it's good to be prepared of some surprises and also some new insights, maybe more on the intuitive side with this. But it's interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and they're cardinal signs. So there's definitely something about taking action that we're going to be doing, I think. And it may be unexpected, but another thought that occurs to me with, as Monica was saying, Cancer and Capricorn being so traditional and, very focused on, home and work. What kind of is hitting me is, what are you willing to defend? To me, that's a very Cancerian thing. A mother defends her child, a family defends their home. So what are we willing to defend? And perhaps defense here is speaking out or speaking up, in ways that maybe have been difficult or that bring up some type of fear, some type of Plutonian fear. So this is interesting to see what people will be breaking through in their worlds during this lunation.
This Cazimi will be 3 degrees away from a position to Pluto. So it will be at 24 degrees of Cancer and Pluto is at 27 of Capricorn. So that will be 3 degrees away from that exact opposition. So yeah, I think there is something about speaking up to the power, speaking up to the structures, but also finding that structure and power within us to speak for the family that we have. And again, however you define that family, it not necessarily means mother and father. It means the tribe that you have, the spiritual circle that you have, the tribe that you're connected with. So that family that you want to protect, people that nourish you, you nourish them, people who are your support, that you would consider family, and maybe you need to speak up for those people. And I think that there is something interesting happening about this full moon. We did say that new moon last new moon was interesting. I think there's a continuation with this one. And Kimberly, you mentioned something before we started about the Lilith. I think that fits in so well with what we're just saying now.
Yes, it does. It does. Do you want to move into that now, or do you want to talk about Uranus and the nodes first, and then, or come back to them?
Oh, we can do whichever way,
whatever works with y'all.
Well, I'm just thinking. I can just go with the Uranus.
It's a good
and nodes.
segue, right? So why not just kind of step out of the moon for a second and talk about that Black Moon Lilith? She is not that far away from that moon.
Yeah.
So she's on this chart because normally we don't put points and asteroids and things. We stick to just the nodes and the 10 modern planets when we're coming together collectively. But she's on here because earlier I asked if we could talk about her a bit, and we talked about her a bit, as Monica said, the last new moon that we did. So what I find really intriguing is, like, Black Moon Lilith is so mysterious. It's one of the reasons I think I'm so intrigued by her. It's this empty void, the second focus that is in the center of the moon's orbit. Earth is one focus, Black Moon Lilith is the other. And when we place her in the chart, from our point of view, she's always aligned by zodiac sign. She's going to be lined up from our line of sight, as it were, with the moon's apogee, that point farthest away from Earth. So there's something about her that pulls us out of our normal earthly incarnation self. I think that's part of the reason she's often associated with the archetypes of the wild woman, or of the person who, the part of us that is the person who goes against perhaps how we've chosen to be in this physical form. So this is sort of taking that idea of breaking the societal or family boundary lines or conditioning even further. What's going on collectively? What has happened with, the female line, either biologically or my spiritual community? It's, to me, holds all this emotion about what has been stripped away. And I think that primarily she represents, to me, society's view about femininity. Because if you just go back and read the stories of Lilith, going all the way back to, ancient Sumerian and Akkadian cultures, to more the start of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and you see how her story kept changing. She was a goddess. She became the handmaiden of a goddess. She became a handmaiden of a god who left rather than conform. She became demonized, and she became a demon, and on and on. And we can see that as society's view of the great mysteries of being a woman, however you define that, have changed, and fears and things have come in. The whole concept of her has changed. So I feel like she's what's been stripped away, and she's what we are here to reclaim. And so there's a lot of fear and a lot of shame and a lot of emotion wrapped up, and some of it's mine and some of it's what we carry. So that's my long-winded soapbox. Believe it or not, that's keeping it short, because I could probably go for a day and a half on Lilith. But she's so impactful. In the last new moon, the new moon happened right at that point. And for anyone who follows kind of the daily moon phases, cycles, that new moon lasted for like 4 days. We had 4.5 days before the moon went from a 0 degrees sun and moon together to a 45-degree separation, which would be technically the beginning of our crescent. It took 3 days before she even left Cancer. It took 4.5 days before there was enough separation to call it a crescent. That's long, because it happened at that point farthest away from Earth, where the moon is so slow. So I think there's a downloading, a seeding energy. And as Monica said, this full moon that we're looking at now, it's a continuation of what started 2 weeks ago. So I think this is strong and intense and heavy, and definitely, the divine feminine rising, however one defines it. And that's not about being a man or a woman. And it's a phrase I don't use a lot, but that's what's here. And I think it's also about reclaiming what has been taken away historically, culturally, by our family, Cancer, by our society, Capricorn. And what's really intriguing to me is not only that she's really wide orb, she's conjunct that sun, she's pulled into this lunation for second time 2 weeks in a row, but she's retrograde. So by the weekend after this, by that Sunday, she's going to be back at the same degree the new moon was. We're going to see some connections to what happened or started 2 weeks ago resurfacing. And by next week of Tuesday, I believe, of next week, she's going to be conjunct Venus. Venus will have ingressed into Cancer, and they will be conjunct. And so I think in terms of what's happening with women, women's roles here in the United States, they're called the marches and the people speaking out against some of the decisions around abortion and abortion rights. We're calling this the Summer of Rage. How appropriate is that for Lilith? Right. So I think we're going to see more happen. But I'll stop there rather than go into world events, and pull myself back and listen to what you guys have to say. What do y'all think?
I mean, we talked about that at the new moon, so I would encourage people to go back to our latest episode and listen to that segment when we were talking about Lilith at the new moon, because there is something about that sacred rage that is growing with us, and we need to know how to channel that. It can be destructive or it can be constructive. I do think, again, like we say, it's the cycle upon cycle. So it's the layer upon layer. We have Lilith there. Then she'll go and touch the same new moon point that happened in the new moon in Cancer. Then she'll meet Venus. So there is this kind of, energy stirring in that Cancerian waters, and they will give birth to something interesting. And we can see that in the world. We can see that something's changing, that something's stirring. Like you say, in US, there is a lot of protests and people already calling it a summer of rage. So there is something like that happening. It's interestingly, I actually went to see, just a segue, I went to see a beautiful performance at the new moon. And I'm sure that the performer here in UK, in Birmingham, didn't choose that time. It's part of the a dance festival in Birmingham that we're celebrating. And I thought I will probably butcher the name. I'm so bad at names, but it's Kahawi Dance Theatre from Canada, and the performer and obviously the artistic director Santi Smith was incredible. The performance was amazing. I had goosebumps head to toe, and it was all about women, about the rage, specifically about what she's been through and what she wanted to talk about, her heritage as a native person from Canada. It was really, really interesting, and it was palatable. And that war cries that were heard on stage, you could hear generation of women screaming through that. It was more than theater performance. It was borderline a ritualistic thing, not a sacred ritual that obviously are part of her heritage or part of her lineage. But what I mean is that theater performance ascended to something more than just a pure entertainment. It had that ritualistic feel to it. And I think, again, this is just such a small thing that's showing us that something is rising, and it asking us, what have we done with the divine feminine? It doesn't matter what gender you identify yourself with. What matters is that there are certain things that we assigned to a gender that we do not value. We don't value caring for others. We don't value empathy. We don't value the soft skills. Who do we value? We value people who are, great CEO that will get there, talk, bollocks, don't have any empathy for this, can't understand. But we value them. CEO of the company will get great salary. The nurse, the teacher, the personal carer, they're not as valued in our societies in a Western world. And we've talked about it, and I know I've talked about it for a long time. And again, this is not individual people. I'm not saying CEO of so-and-so company or this person. You might be that person that is changing that within your own company. And I see that in some of the corporations when they are more driven by value, by empathy, by understanding that we need rest, by understanding we need recuperation, by understanding we need sleep, for example. But those qualities, traditionally, they're assigned to feminine qualities. They are not values. And I think those qualities, that energy is coming back and saying, without us, you're going to fall apart. Without those qualities, you're going to fall apart.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes more sense to you guys.
It really makes sense to me. And this kind of ties in, I think some of what you're saying is a great segue into that sextile to Uranus, because I think taking that another step further, what about what we do value about quote unquote women? There's a very society, the Capricornian world has set a very strict definition of what it means to be female or woman. And so if somebody is gay, lesbian, transsexual, falling into any other category that doesn't fit within society's very narrow view box, I think this is another wave of speaking up and speaking out and saying, like, you, the you collectively out there, do not have the right to define me I'm going to define me, and the anger about having to fight yet again this continual fight. And so I think there's something about finding the tribe, finding the collective, finding the people who do think like me, so we can all speak out. I know that as this energy's been growing, kind of seeded, if you will, 2 weeks ago at the new moon, I've been looking for who are the people who think like me and speak out in ways that I have not yet learned to, whether that's social media, whether that's connecting. There's this yearning of, it's time to fight. In my language, it's time to fight against the patriarchy and, undo some of the conditioning. You may have totally different language, but it's that idea of let's collectively find the people who are willing to help all of us get outside the box and away from the conditioning and be free to be ourselves.
I think there's the layer as well when we talk about patriarchy, about colonization. So there is no revolution without indigenous people and connection to earth. And again, that North Node in Uranus, I think in Taurus, speaks strongly to that force of who is it that we know that has that connection to the earth and what Mother Earth needs, and who can actually the best advise and is in position to advise on our eco issues, on our climate change, on how to change that. We can't solve the issues that we created through Capricornian patriarchal ways. We can't solve them through Capricornian patriarchal ways. So where do we look for the solution? Look into opposition. In astrology as well, there is this idea of polarity point. If there is a tension in a chart, you look for the polarity point and for release, and polarity point is the opposition point. I like that idea to apply to that as well. It's like you're not going to fix an issue created by one system within that system, because the issue is not created within that. The issue is the system. So what do we do with that? We need to find ways and look around. Is there another system? Is there another method? Is there another way of thinking that we can try to remedy the things that happen? And they are. We might think in our Western world as well that the patriarchal ways are the only ways because they are so ingrained. But that moon out of bounds, that Mercury out of bounds, that Lilith stirring stuff in Cancer, they tell us, hey, there is a way of thinking out of the box. There are still ways that has been preserved, especially by indigenous communities, that talk about different connection to the earth. They talk about different connections within communities that might be more healing than we do in the systems that we have now. So there is something about that Uranus North Node Taurus to me that speaks about that as well. If we're looking for the solution, and if we're looking for that power, and if we're looking to speak to the injustice that we perceive, where do we look for solution? Within the system or outside of the system?
Yeah.
Well, if someone was interested what our political views, you would not be able to tell from this episode, would you?
Not at all. Although I don't know, Anne is being a little more mysterious. A good Scorpio.
Yeah, of course I have to do that. It's my image.
I think taking this away from world events and bringing it kind of personal again, as a natal astrologer, I'm always like, how does it affect me? How does it affect you? Some of what's happening in the world stage, like we see all of this astrology manifesting in daily lives. I just had an experience the other day. So I have social media that's for astrology, and I have social media accounts that are personal. And on one of my personal accounts, I posted something about, I'm enraged. And after many posts, maybe too many posts, I had some friends say, I feel like you're treating me like the enemy. Totally paraphrasing here, right? I had some other friends who were like, well, we feel like, we've been demonized. And I'm thinking, oh, there's Lilith. Oh, there's Cancer. There's Capricorn. And back and forth. And finally, I'm infuriated because I'm like, it's my page. I can say whatever I want. This is my space. It's not my public space. And what occurred to me in the midst of the very minor 2 hour brouhaha, which wasn't that big except in my head. But what occurred to me was, oh, I'm going against the conditioning of what I've been taught. My mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother were very vocal, outspoken women in the home, but not out in the world. You go out into the world, you keep it all private, you pull it all in. Ladies don't get angry. You know, those kind of messages were just so strong in my upbringing. And what I realized was I'm breaking from that family conditioning. And it occurred to me, oh, here's the shadow side of Uranus. Here's the shadow side of being radical. Being radical means I have to deal with those feelings of I'm doing wrong. I'm dealing with feelings of shame. I can hear those voices in my head of people who would be judging me if they were still alive, and that's not the way to be. And overcoming this deep-seated emotional irrational fear about doing it differently. Is that not, just a very microcosm example of how difficult it can be to really bring a Uranus and Taurus into the fold through the sextile? It's still challenging. It's still difficult. There's still shadows to face, even when it's what we want.
But we're kind of lucky because help is on the way. Mars is now in Taurus. And speaking about speeding things up steadily, then we have Mars that's going to be joining those two, like the Uranus and the North Node, later in the beginning of August, actually. But right now, Mars is wild and free, not making aspects. So we have Mercury that's out of bounds, but we have also planets in these charts that are out of aspects right now. So they kind of, I see the unaspected planet as a planet that's kind of more free from being tied down by aspects. If you want to feel the energy, the raw energy of that planet working its way in the sign, then we can think that Mars in Taurus can be quite an interesting, unaspected planet. Or what do you think, Monica?
Being put on the spot. So yeah, I need to find a different word for interesting. I'm going to just use that way too much. We have Mars and we have Jupiter unaspected in this new moon chart, in this lunation. And for me, the unaspected planets, obviously they don't talk to anything else. So when we talk about aspects, what it is the planets exchange energy. They might have a tense energy because they're in square on opposition. So one planet wants there, another one wants there. Or they can be in fairly comfortable conversation, like a trine or sextile. It's like, okay, cool, we can do that together. So this is where those energies talk to one another. Mars and Jupiter, they're just playing in their own sandbox. Like they don't talk to anyone. They don't take anything from anyone. They're just on their own. So for me, those energies usually manifest in two ways, again, in extreme ways. One, we cannot tap into that because that planet doesn't touch anything else within our chart. We can't feel that energy. We can't tap into it. We can't understand it within us. So that Mars, that anger or rage or assertiveness might not be available to us at the time because our emotions, our moon or our structures, our Saturn or our Mercury communication doesn't know how to communicate that. It's not connected. So it's kind of like something got unplugged. It's there underneath, bumbling in, but we cannot tap into that, understand and use it. So that's one thing. And then when it comes back, it might come back like, whoa, where did that come from? I didn't expect it to happen because it was building up without us noticing. The other way, again, is the extreme, is where that planet actually takes over because it's unaspected, because there's no one telling it what to do. I'm playing with my own toys in my own sandbox, and I am going to play big. And again, we can see, oh my God, how did I not see that coming? Or why is that Mars taking over and I am nothing but rage? There is no reasoning with me because Mercury not connected. There is no structure with me because the Saturn is not connected. I don't feel my energy and how I'm burning because my moon is not connected, but I am all rage. So it's interesting. And again, none of us, it's a mundane astrologer. None of us would describe ourselves as mundane astrologers. So we're trying to bring that worldview a bit more so we can understand how that can manifest on the world stage. But really what we'd like to do in that podcast is talk about those energies within us. So how do we work with that? And it would be interesting, again, at that full moon, when that energy is already high, to see within yourself, is that Mars that is unaspected, is it touching something? If you have a sensitive point around 5 degrees of a fixed signs, that Mars energy will be touching you, will be stirring something that you might not be aware of because it's unexpected. But either you will blow up and people will say, where is that coming from? And you're like, what do you mean? I don't understand what you mean because you can't see it. Or it will be boiling there, touching something sensitive. And then it will come up when it will go into an aspect and it will go through that aspect. So that's my take.
I like what you just said, that kind of what you just ended there with resonates a lot with how I work with unaspected planets, which is if it's unaspected in the transit up in the sky, as both of you mentioned, that energy becomes really potent and powerful and builds up and has this ability to really pop. And yet it's difficult to find ways of letting that out. So what I believe is that makes the aspects it makes to your chart. In other words, if you compare your birth chart to the transit charts, as many of us do, that aspect it's making to any planets you have at 5 degrees, it makes it that much more intense. I use the analogy of, you go on a great vacation and you come back home and you're on the phone and you've just told like 15 different friends all about what you did. And then your mother calls and you're like, yeah, well, it was great. And this is what happened. Like a lot of the steam is gone. Or you want to write a novel and you've talked about it to 15 people. And now it's like, well, I still want to do it, but it's not the same as if you're keeping it quiet and you're just with it. And suddenly that first person calls you 3 weeks later and you're like, oh my gosh, let me tell you. That's the energy I get. And especially with Mars, which is about action and amongst all of the emotions of anger and rage, but really action. What am I going to do with this energy, this push? And Jupiter that wants to expand everything in Mars's sign of Aries. So I really feel that whatever this full moon touches in your chart has the ability to both be explosive, to force us to just take action, and also to do it without a lot of awareness. It's sort of the leap before you think, because I like how Anne put it, like wild and free. I don't have to use Mars the way I normally do. My normal way of connecting with Mars is to go into my body or into anger or into action. Like I have my default. We all have this is our comfort zone with that planet. Now it's like no holds barred. We can do anything we want, any way we want. And since there aren't actual aspects up in the sky in the transit happening, it's all happening, I think, without a lot of awareness. It's just happening. It's much more explosive, spontaneous. So I am both excited to see what this brings up and excited with a little bit of trepidation because, okay, what am I going to have to do with what comes up after the fact? So it's sort of that we're putting the cannonball in the cannon and it's about to fire, but I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about the impact after it's over. But I'm mostly excited.
And just to bring it back again, just a keyword, Jupiter is in Aries, like you mentioned, Kimberly. Jupiter is our worldview. It's what we think about the world, right? Our values, not in terms of values like in Taurus, but what mindset do we have? What spiritual, scientific values do we hold? How do we see the world and how we make a judgment in the world? Jupiter is that inner judge that we have that makes a judgment about something based on set of values that we have. And that's in Aries. So that's already, it's all about me and what I think and what are my values. And my worldview is better than your worldview. and you have Mars then sitting in the sign of Taurus, again unaspected, ruling that Jupiter. So there is something, like we said, about those structures that we need to rethink, reevaluate with this full moon. And there is this kind of power keg of Mars and Jupiter sitting there ready to burst. So I think there's a lot of people that will be doing some rethinking about, what are the values that they want to stand for? What is the worldview that they want to see? Regardless of what worldview you subscribe to. It might be, anarchistic worldview. It might be, fascist worldview. Whatever worldview you have, I think this will be the time when people rethink, and that power keg is there. And again, I suspect there will be a clash, whether on personal level with people that don't think like you, whether within the families, or whether on a larger scale.
Yeah.
Sorry to be a downer, but
I don't
think
think
there's
it's a
something
downer.
explosive. I think there's something explosive that's coming up.
Yeah, and I don't think it's being a
Metaphorically
downer
speaking.
to be see, astrology for me, it helps me understand both myself and myself within the world around me. And sometimes what we need to understand are things that are difficult and hard. I don't think it's being a downer. It's I think that's part of the reason the three of us came together, because we
Yes.
really value let's look at some of the shadow and let's dive into that, as well as the light.
Well, Anne, would you like to add anything about any of the aspects, or should we go to our tips?
I think it's time for the tips now.
Okay. Do you want to go first with our tips?
Yeah, why not? For moon in Capricorn, I also associate this sign a lot with music. Many Capricorns are very fond of music and very talented. But I thought about the full moon and about tuning into emotions that it rises, and that I thought about a tip to choose some old song that you like very much, and really go in and think about how did that song make me feel, and why did I like that song so much. That's my tip.
I love that.
Cool.
I'm going to do that. That is beautiful. My tip's not nearly as nurturing. I went with the Pluto Moon conjunction, and my goal, using Capricorn words, my goal for this particular full moon is to really look at what were the actions, what were the goals I had set back in January, and of the ones not yet attained, what are the actions I'm afraid to take, and kind of get some mental clarity, not just about not being so linear of step one, step two, step three, but really honoring there's some deep emotion, there's some fear, there's something to transform here. And I used to be a feel the fear and do it anyway, push through kind of person. I'm recognizing now that perhaps honoring those feelings, allowing oneself to feel those feelings and transforming those feelings from fear into excitement or joy or something else might be more useful than just pushing through. So that's my tip, is take some time to reflect on what were the goals you set in January. Of the ones you have not yet achieved, what are the actions you're afraid to take, and get some clarity around that.
Right.
Cool one.
Monica, what about you?
I definitely going to look at the stuff that I'm afraid to take actionable steps forward with. I have two quick tips. One is more challenging than the other. So one is on a positive note, full moon, like we said at the beginning, it is about achievement. So we know that Capricornians are not great at patting themselves on the shoulder, but maybe looking at that exercise that Kimberly said, look at what you haven't achieved, and what are the fears that blocking you, but also look at what you have achieved. That might help you look into those fears, because if you already achieved things that maybe, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, 10 years ago were fearful, and you're like, oh, but I've achieved them now, then the stuff that's still, still give you that fear, that stress, maybe you'll be able to look at them in a different way. So look at what you already achieved and how much power you've gained, how much authority, expertise you've gained from that. The more challenging one, I think it would be to go back to your conditioning and look at what are the systems that you have within you that you can recognize, whether it's the family system, religious systems, that you can tell that you can't express yourself well. Mercury in that Cancer, you cannot express yourself well within that system, and maybe look around to tribes, systems, different way of thinking, different cultures. What do they have that maybe you're lacking? Because learning from another culture might be a way to go forward. Maybe learning a different approach to building a structure in our lives that will become a tradition for the generation to come. Maybe that needs to start with us. So those would be my 2 tips. 1, appreciate what you already achieved. 2, look into the stuff that you want to change. And instead of looking to change them within the structure that's already there, have a look if you can use that Uranian sextile energy and think outside the box. Is it a different culture that you would like to learn from and apply their way of thinking, of living, of communicating into your own life? So that would be it for me.
Awesome.
Very good.
Well, I think that's a good one too, both of them. And I don't know. I'm going to make notes here as soon as we log off of give myself homework, 4 things to do, starting with music.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I really look forward to talking with y'all on the other side of this lunation and hearing how it manifested, what exploded, and also hearing about the newest member of the Sundell's family, who will probably be here by then. And and to our viewers, feel free as always to post. I love reading comments about either what resonated for you or what transpires, and take some time to maybe go back and listen to our podcast from January on the Capricorn new moon, or you might want to listen to when Jupiter went into Aries, as we've been talking about some of this exciting stuff.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for joining us in this week's Astro Chat. We hope that you enjoyed the discussion and would love to hear about anything that resonated with you. Keep the conversation going by posting shareable content on our Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube pages. You can also email us at astrochatpodcast@gmail.com. AstroChat is uploaded every 2 weeks on the Saturday before each new and full moon. Look for us on your favorite podcast platform as well as on YouTube. You can support AstroChat and receive exclusive content by donating on our Patreon page. We look forward to chatting with you all again at the next lunation of the moon.